Good morning. Welcome to Learning to Learn a Language. We are with our, of course, 11th Standard English reader. The book has been comfortably unitized and graded also. And now at present we are with the third unit and third section. Now when I talk about third unit, already we came upon Robert Lind and his brilliant article on forgetting. We went on to talk about William Wordsworth, who glorifies the beauty of nature and asks, what have you done as a human being? What have you done? What is your contribution? You have been watching nature in her fullest glory, but have you ever contributed anything? What have you made of yourself? With these questions, we move on to the third part of our third unit, which is of course a supplementary reader, or you call it extension reader. And for the first time, you come upon a brilliant skit or a play. It's just a one-act play, and it is by C.V. Burgess, who is known for bringing out the ironies of life in his own typical comical way. Now you feel like laughing throughout the play because it repeatedly reminds you of your own predicament, but towards the end you also feel the only way to come out of such ironic situations is to laugh at the whole thing. Not to take it too seriously to heart, because you will feel miserable and you will spread misery. What exactly is the play about? Now before you get into the play, I would like to ask you a question. Have you ever visited a dentist? Of course you did hear me right. Have you ever visited a dentist? Because the Western world always insists on children making it a point to visit the dentist periodically. Because you all fall into the category of loving sweets, eating too much of chocolates, and not having any healthy habit regarding maintenance of your dental hygiene, right? So most often we forget to brush our teeth at night, or we ignore, or sometimes we also present logical arguments against it. But what really happens is, when you're taken to a dentist, it rather throws you into a very embarrassing situation, and it is pretty painful also. It's not the real experience which is painful. Our imagination about the experience makes it all the more painful. Now this particular play talks about people. You need not even name them, any name is suitable. It talks about an ambience, that is people waiting at the dental clinic to meet the dentist, and it is certainly not the evening time, or it is not the noon time. It happens to be early in the morning, early in the sense around 8:30. It's a bit too early to visit a dentist, but nonetheless there are people who would like to have their teeth checked and then rush to their routine work. And of course a couple of people would have taken an off from their work, and mothers would have brought their young ones for a dental check, because before going to school the child would have picked up some kind of a problem and would have started crying its heart out, saying that I have to be necessarily taken to a dentist. Fine, whatever may be the situation, we have the play waiting for us, and I would appreciate if only you go in for role play, because it's so easy. The dialogues are so easy, the English is equally easy. All you have to do is you have to train yourself a couple of times regarding the articulation, the tonal variation, the modulation of voice, and of course it has to go with suitable body language. If you have to wait at the dentist clinic, you can't be smiling and giving a big broad beaming smile, because you would have visited the place plainly because you have some toothache, right? So the writer gives you the characters, he presents you the characters, but before that there is a bit of a warming up. The warming up is like giving you the occupation of certain people and asking what could be the tools used by these people. If it happens to be an electrician, what do you expect him to carry along with him? If it happens to be a dentist, what do you expect him to carry along? If the person happens to be a carpenter, what are all the tools he has to make use of to carry on with his occupation? You know, after this you straight away plunge into this brilliant play. So the characters are distributed thus. You have somewhere around 1 to 8 men we have just one person who has got a name, Joe. He is the first patient. That is, the whole play is titled that way. So it happens to be the first patient. And you also have his wife, Emily. Now these are the two. This particular couple have arrived very early to the dental clinic, and they are waiting there. And you have lots of men. That's exactly what the writer says, 1 to 8 men, 1 to 8 women. Fine. You can call them the first woman, the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, or the second man, third man, fourth man, fifth man, sixth till 8th. And of course you have a little boy, Morris, his mother. He has come along with his mother. And you have a little girl, Dorothy, who has come there with her mother. Other than these people, you have a nurse, of course, that is pretty guessable, and the dentist. Now as the curtain raises, you find these people, a couple of them are yet to arrive. Most of them have already come there and they are waiting, and you find the fourth man with a bandage around the jaw because he would have had his tooth removed, or he is suffering from too much of pain, whatever it is. Now he looks very sick. And you have men there, some of them are reading journals, some of them are reading newspapers, and you also have women. One among them is somebody very, very peculiar. So whenever you visit a doctor, don't worry, you will have such people also there in the waiting hall. Now she happens to be the fifth woman, we need not name her. The fifth woman, it looks as if she has anticipated this kind of a long wait at the dentist, and she has come thoroughly prepared. Now what do you mean by coming thoroughly prepared? You cannot come there with something to eat because you visit a dentist as a result of your toothache. So you will not be in a position to enjoy anything, eating anything. So she has come with one bag filled with photographs that have been taken during her previous vacations. She spent some time somewhere and she has got loads of photographs and she has brought it. And she has also decided that she is going to sit and look at them and enjoy. She is also going to make use of somebody else who comes there visiting the dentist. So you have a kind of a victim there. A victim in the sense a person who cannot run away from the context, a person who does not want to look rude by saying that I am sorry, I have pain and I am not in a mood at all to enjoy the photographs you have taken when you spent your holidays elsewhere. No, that would sound very, very rude. So somebody out of decency will become a kind of a victim and at least pretend to be enjoying looking at the photograph. So you have a sixth woman. If she moves away, you may have a fourth woman. If she moves away, you may have the eighth woman. You will have somebody else to give her company. And you also have, amongst the men, you also have one or two of them who do not like little children, especially in this context, because children are mischievous wherever they are. And they are not like adults. Their mind can be very easily distracted. Even if they have immense pain, if you show them something else, it's easy to distract their mind from the pain, right? So you have two kids, fine. So this is exactly the scenario, and already the conversation is in progress. They talk about visiting or being compelled to visit a dentist so early in the morning. So a lady asks one of the men sitting there who has arrived very early, she asks, when did you come? He immediately says that I am here by 8:30 in the morning. She says, I would not have even woken up completely from my bed. It's so early. I have been repeatedly telling that the dentist has to have a specific time, certainly not this early in the morning. So hope he arrives early. And the fifth woman, about whom I just now made a mention of, now she has caught hold of another woman and she says, I think you will appreciate looking at these pictures because they are such fun. They are so beautiful. The landlady with whom we stayed was such a magnificent person, but unfortunately her face is not visible here. It's all blurred. Now she keeps on talking. Maybe she has that habit of continuous talk, especially when you're visiting a dentist. And that's exactly what makes it very surprising. Now as these people keep talking, you have a lady who arrives with a girl, Dorothy, and the girl has already started crying. She is sobbing. She says, I do not want to visit the dentist. I do not want to meet the doctor. But The mother says, come on, it's not going to be painful at all. It's certainly not going to be painful. And if you're not going to meet the dentist, I'm sorry, your father has already told you there are no more ice lollies. You will not get ice creams. Fine? You will not be allowed to, because it's going to hurt your tooth. So the best thing is visit the doctor. It's not going to be painful at all. Don't worry. Now she keeps on cajoling the girl, trying to make the little girl happy. Fine. Now comes another mother with her little son Morris, and she also treats him like a little baby. She says it's just going to be just tiny bit painful. It's not going to be, it's a kind of tickling only, and even before you know, the tooth would have been uprooted. Immediately the boy retorts saying that I'm not a baby, don't treat me like a baby. Fine, I know how it will be with the dentist. I'm not scared. So saying, he just wouldn't sit near his mother. He would like to go collect a couple of books or magazines there and says, I'm in a mood to read. Now all you have to understand is this little girl and the little boy should have gone to their school on that particular day. It's a working day, because these men have also been talking about availing leave to stay back, or availing a couple of hours of permission to stay back so that they can meet the doctor and then go back to their work. So these two kids should have had their schooling, but because they made a complaint to their mothers that they have got toothache, they have been brought over here. As this scenario settles down, you find the nurse arriving, and immediately the moment nurse arrives, you can expect that the doctor should also be right behind. The doctor also arrives, and as he comes inside, he says he would like to meet the first patient. That's exactly is the title of the beautiful little play. Who happens to be the first patient? It is Joe. Only he has got his name, and towards the end, when he asks his wife Emily what exactly is wrong with her, we get to know that her name is Emily. Now as he is ready to get up, the doctor says, please, the first patient to the surgery room. So as he is getting up, his wife tells him, Joe, you will remind the doctor to pull out only the right tooth, nothing else please. This gives us a bit of a suspicion that something could have gone wrong earlier, or maybe the wrong tooth or the kind of a healthy tooth would have been pulled out. We do not know. But this is a kind of a warning she gives, and she says, don't worry Joe, I'll be waiting for you here. Fine. And they all again settle down. Joe has already entered the room of surgery, and they ask to each other about the doctor and his credentials. Is he a good doctor? Is it safe to get yourself operated by this doctor? Now what about his credentials? How good he is? Is he popular amongst people? So at another man, he says he talks about a lady who came there, and even before she could really know what was happening, some of her teeth got pulled out and she didn't even feel the pain. Another person says, this time I am going to ask for the gas, that is the anesthesia. I am going to ask him to make use of the gas, the anesthesia, that is I'll inhale so that I will not feel the pain. Let him go back to the traditional ones, not the new methods at all. As these people engage themselves in the talk, the fifth woman, who looks as if her main business is only to look at the photographs, enjoy them personally, and compel another unwilling victim to enjoy the same. Now she goes on with her till the end. You will find her just looking at the photographs, right, and showing it to everybody. At this juncture, the nurse who was in the surgery chamber, she comes out, and when she goes by, people look at her. All these patients, they look at her, and people who have come along with the patients also look at her. She doesn't say anything. She doesn't give a glimpse to anybody else. She just walks in and comes back with dragging a hammer in her hand. Now all these people look very, very surprised, because you don't expect a hammer to be used by a dentist. You know, everyone immediately gets a kind of a weird imagination. They start imagining the worst possible things, and the moment it goes inside, you hear the doctor saying something, and bang bang, the sound is audible. Joe's wife Emily, who is seated outside, she screams and she gets up and she attempts to get inside the surgery chamber, telling that my poor Joe, he cannot have his teeth hammered by the doctor. She thinks, or she rather believes, and she is very worried, that the doctor has asked the nurse to bring hammer, which is not a tool of the doctor, fine, as far as we all know, to bang on his teeth and pull out one particular unhealthy one. Another man says, of course, the doctor has to use a hammer. If the doctor, if I find a dentist not using a hammer, then I should think that he happens to be a doctor who has to check my eye and not my tooth. Fine. Very slowly, people pull down Joe's wife, Emily. They convince her, they pacify her, telling that don't worry, it's not going to be anything serious, because you don't hear him screaming at all. It's just the doctor who says something. There is no problem. Don't worry. You know, the talk continues. This lady continues to show the photograph to another woman who doesn't know how to escape from this kind of seemingly harmless torture. Right? At that moment, you find the nurse coming out again. So all these people look at the nurse just to get to know something from her body language, at least from her facial expression, what could have happened to Joe, who is inside the surgery room, and just then the hammer had been taken. Right? This time the nurse comes out and she doesn't seem, there is nothing, her facial expression does not cause any worry. So people also tell Joe's wife, don't worry, look at her, she doesn't seem to be worried at all. Another person retorts, it's not the nurse who should be worried, it's Joe who is inside, caught in the dentist chamber. He should be worried. Now as these people keep talking, the nurse goes back into the chamber, that is the surgery room, with something equally strange as the hammer. This time it happens to be a pair of pliers. You call them cutting plier, right? So it happens to be a pair of pliers. It looks as if the doctor is going to make use of the plier to pull out a tooth which hurts Joe. Even that does not look appropriate for a dentist. It's certainly not a tool you expect a dentist to be using. These people look visibly alarmed, and this time again Emily, Joe's wife, she makes a dash to the room, the surgery room. People, other ladies pull her down, telling don't worry, don't grow anxious, Joe can manage, you don't hear any scream of Joe, don't worry, everything is normal. Now such things are used. But Joe's wife Emily continues to express her anxiety. She says, poor Joe, my poor Joe, I do not know how he is going to bear the pain. At that moment there is a bit of a noise. People turn around and what do they see? They see little Morris the boy and Dorothy the little girl. These two have picked up some kind of a fight over a journal or a book or a magazine, which was each one claims that they happened to come upon it earlier than the other, and there is a kind of a tug of war. The mothers of these two kids, they literally tear them apart, put them in their place, but these children can never be controlled. You find Dorothy's mother telling her that she is really going to make a complaint to her father that Dorothy was misbehaving at the dentist clinic. And Dorothy gives a very sarcastic comment saying that I don't care to whomsoever you may tell, I will not catch me worrying about all your threats. On the other hand, you find, of course, Morris is also equally a misbehaving kid. At that particular moment, you hear a scream from inside. Just then the pliers have gone inside. The nurse has taken a pair of pliers. Already the hammer has gone in. Bang, bang happens to be the sound. Somebody is knocking at something. Somebody is breaking at something. And if a dentist keeps on swearing while breaking something, all the clients or the people, the patients who are outside can imagine that poor Joe who has gone in is put to ultimate torture in the name of his tooth getting removed. Fine. These two children are brought back and they are made to sit, and one man, one among the 8 people, men who have gathered there, already Joe has gone inside. There is another 4th man with a bandage over his jaw, right? One of these men, he makes a complaint that he does not like children in these places because they mess up with everything. At that moment there is a scream heard, and immediately Morris turns around, the little boy turns around and asks his mother, what could the scream be? And his mother says, don't ask me embarrassing questions. One among these men, he says that happens to be Joe screaming out when his tooth gets pulled out. Don't worry, you will scream louder when yours is taken away. Morris' mother says that is too rude to talk to a boy. But the man who uttered these words to Morris, he says that's exactly children should be brought up. They have to know reality. You can't just pamper them telling lies. You have to tell them what is to be expected of in a dentist clinic. At that moment, amidst this noise and confusion. Somebody is very busy doing the job which she started doing very early. That is, the fifth woman continues to show the photographs to another woman. The other woman is not able to escape, right? And Joe's wife Emily seems to be on tender hooks. Every time there is a scream heard, every time there is a strange noise that comes out of the chamber, she makes a dash to the room, attempting to save her husband Joe. A couple of women pull her down, telling, don't worry, everything is going to be normal, there is no problem at all, don't imagine too much. No, this is a kind of a confused state outside, and the nurse, once again, she comes out. All these patients look at her very eagerly, because they are, one thing is, it's getting really late. Second one is, we really do not know what is happening inside, because Joe, who has gone inside as the first patient, has not come out at all, and we hear certain sounds which cannot be treated lightly. They seem to be somebody groaning, and of course you have one man, the fourth man, continuously groaning with pain. So everything seems to be pretty alarming to people who are waiting outside, totally clueless as to what is happening inside the chamber. So each one tells, let me go. At this time, you find the nurse coming out, and she goes elsewhere and brings now a saw, fine, a blade which is used to saw a piece of wood, hacksaw. Now the people are totally convinced that the doctor is using absolutely primitive tools to uproot the tooth of any patient who happens to visit him. That's more than enough. This fear sends one after the other outside the clinic. One after the other, he says, no, there is no point in waiting here for anymore, because I have to go back to my office. I have got other urgent works. It is already late. Men and women, very slowly, they start escaping, except of course Joe's wife Emily, who has to be there. At this point, the little girl now, she is very alarmed, and she starts sobbing. And Morris, the little boy, he says to his mother, let me go back to school. His mother is really taken aback. She says, how can you go back to school? After all, today morning when you were preparing to go to school, you complained of toothache, and I have to immediately rush you over here. Now you say you can go back to school. What do you mean? The little boy says, I do not have any toothache at all. The boy is very scared now. Because every little instrument that goes inside does not seem to be the instruments which will be the tools used by a dentist. So the boy says, no, I just bluffed because I did not want to go to school. I complain of toothache, but I would rather go to school than visit the doctor. The mother pulls him by ears, and she tells that I'm going to take you back to school and make a complaint to your headmaster so that he can thrash you for the prank you played. So the little boy and the mother go away. The little girl now, Dorothy, she starts screaming and crying and sobbing. As she starts doing all this, the other men also start leaving. Even the fourth man, who with a bandage over his jaw, who was groaning with pain, he also happens to leave. And the mother says, look here, because of your crying, because of your sobbing, you have already made people flee away from this clinic. They have run away. And little Dorothy says, of course they are lucky, they ran away. What about me? You wouldn't let me go. She continues to sob. And then sobbingly she tells her mother, I would like to go to school. Mother says, how can you? You have got toothache. She says, no, I just told you a lie. I would like to go away. I don't want to meet the doctor. I do not have any toothache. I would rather go to school than sit here and visit the doctor. The little girl Dorothy and her mother also, they go out. People who are left behind happen to be Emily, the first patient, Joe's wife, who does not know what is happening inside. She is really panic stricken for the plain reason every tool that went inside the chamber happened to be tools which are very primitive in nature, tools which could be used by a carpenter and not a dentist. She is very worried about her husband. Here you find the fifth lady who has been showing the photograph. The one who was seated near her, that lady also takes leave, and she says, no, I have to go. Everybody leaves now. Only two women, Emily and the fifth one. At that juncture, you find the doctor coming out, and he says, I have to bring somebody who can do this job. So saying, he goes out. You find Joe coming. that moment you find Emily bursting into tears because she imagines that the doctor tried his best to remove a tooth from, of course, Joe's mouth, and Joe could not bear the pain, and the doctor is now rushing out to bring back somebody, a better surgeon, to do the job. So Emily breaks into tears and she starts crying. Joe comes out, touches Emily, and when she looks up, he asks, "What's wrong with you? Why do you sit and cry your heart out?" She says, "Didn't the doctor perform a surgery on you? Weren't you not operated upon?" He says, "No, nothing happened. But why did the nurse take a hammer first? Then she went in and took a pair of pliers. Then she came back with and took a saw inside to saw. We thought they are going to saw your tooth." He said, "Nothing. The doctor could not open the tool kit, his surgery kit. He was trying his level best. It got jammed. So I was just seated there waiting for him to open the tools, that is all those instruments which are used by a dentist to remove a tooth of the patient. That particular box, it got jammed and he could not open it. So he was trying with a hammer, he was trying with a plier, and he was trying with a saw also. He could not succeed. Then he said, I need somebody's help who could safely open this for me." Right? At this moment, you find Joe and his wife Emily also leaving. The fifth woman, who has been spending her time in the most useful way, that is, who came thoroughly prepared to spend her time waiting in the clinic. Now she happens to have the photographs. She could not show it to anybody. It looked that she rather enjoys showing it to somebody else than sitting all alone and looking at them. As she turns around, and she feels that people are very rude when they are offered to see photographs. They do not willingly accept such an offer because there is nobody. Everybody has escaped. And people even who called each other by name saying that you are covered, you are very scared, even such people have made an escape after having seen the tools that went inside the surgery room. Right? Now the only person who is waiting is the fifth woman, and the nurse turns around and tells, "Would you mind please getting into the chamber?" Because all the other people who came earlier, all the other people who arrived around 8:30 in the morning, who kept waiting until the arrival of the doctor, all these people have now vanished from the waiting room, and the only person who enjoyed looking at the photographs and who enjoyed showing it to other people, the fifth woman, she is the only lone patient waiting to meet the doctor, and the curtain drops with this. You know, what we really understand is learning a language becomes easier when it is given in the form of dialogues, right? It's just not dialogues. You also have certain non-verbal clues that go with it. You have fillers. I think your teachers will spend some time to make you understand that human speech sounds happen to become fillers. When you are asked a question and when you do not immediately answer a question, or you would like to borrow a couple of seconds to think over the question and give an appropriate answer, your silence that precedes your verbal communication can also become a kind of a filler. Or if somebody asks, "Have you ever visited the dentist?" If that question is thrown at me, my answer would be, "Well, of course." My well, of course, all these happen to be human speech sounds or certain words in isolation used as fillers just to make the other person who asks a question you just help the person to understand that you would like to borrow some minutes before you give your answer, because we do not rehearse these answers. These are questions. Sometimes they happen to be rhetoric questions, also questions which almost become a kind of a statement. The questions do not want or warrant an answer. These are very casual talks where they are not very serious, and you are going to have this conversation only with people whom you will never get a chance of meeting again in your life. Very much like the waiting hall at the doctor's, right? It's a very beautifully made one, and you have so much of irony there. You have situational irony, you have verbal irony, and you also have dramatic irony. Every time the nurse comes out and goes with something which happens to appear kind of a dangerous tool in the hands of a doctor, that is a dentist, right? That becomes a kind of a situational irony, and there are the people, the way they give an answer to certain questions, that becomes a verbal irony. And towards the end, we think Joe, poor Joe who went inside, we are equally concerned, like Emily, his wife. We are also very concerned about Joe's predicament, plight inside, when he comes out hale and hearty, healthy, without his tooth being tampered with or touched upon. This becomes a kind of a dramatic irony, because what you expected to happen has not happened, and you expected all these implements to be used by the doctor to uproot a tooth from Joe, but that did not happen. The poor doctor, the dentist, has been trying desperately to open his tool kit, fine, his surgery kit, and that wouldn't open. It has got jammed, and he needs somebody else's help, maybe a carpenter's help, to open it safely. So all possible ironies crowd there, and you find people with their own wit, their own pun, and their own sarcasm, people who are very impatient in spite of being patients. You happen to come upon two kids who would like to play pranks upon their mothers, telling the mother lie. This is an easy lie. I think every one of us would have tried our own hands with such lies when we never wanted to go to school, or we had some other kind of an assignment in school. It may be an examination, it may be a test, or you have not done your homework. So your body always comes as an immediate somebody to help your friend. You can always throw the blame on your tooth, or you can throw the blame on something else. I am reminded of the Monday mornings of Tom Sawyer, or as we have Malgudi days, when you talk about the little boy Swaminathan. Now, little children always look at working days, going to school, as something very blue, certainly not pleasant. In spite of having loads of friends, they feel that is, to begin with, the first time they go to school, or the first day of the week when they have to go to school after a Sunday, fine, it's always difficult for them, and they resort to all possible lies. And what they really forget is their parents should have also played the same kind of a trick on their grandparents, and the parents just smile, and they bring them to the doctors. And if you are going to talk about Tom Sawyer, every Monday morning he will desperately think, and he will imagine pain in some part of the body. Sometimes it can be the toe, and you will also look at Tom Sawyer this way. He is very much like you. He might have been an American child, but don't worry, he plays the role of our counterpart here. He will imagine on a Monday morning, he will think over completely in his mind. He will ransack every little part of his body and wonder which part it can start aching now. His toe would ache at some point of time, his tooth would ache at some point of time, and unlike the dentist, his Aunt Polly had her own technique of removing a loose tooth from Tom's mouth. Now, when you read through Mark Twain's beautiful narration, sometimes you will feel really, personally I felt very scared, because that appeared to be a very primitive method. She would rather tie a string to the loose tooth, and she will ask the maidservant to bring a log of burning wood. It will be brought close to Tom's face, and he will immediately turn away his face, and what can you expect? The loose tooth would come dangling in the twine or in the thread. Now, it is a bit crude, but nonetheless, unlike you and me, Tom was always delighted whenever the tooth came away from his mouth, because he can now happily go to school and show everyone a human tooth. Fine, children do not get often this chance. He can show everyone, and now that he has got a gap between two of his teeth, he can spit through the gap. Mark Twain will create all possible scenes to make you understand what is the psychology of a 10-year-old boy who refuses to go to school. We all have come through this. And Burgess, through this play, brings back to life all those funny instances. You sit back and laugh. You do not laugh at somebody else's pain. You laugh at those situations through which you also waded out, and now at present you are safe and sound in your place, and you need not visit a dentist in the near future. Right. After the poem, you, as usual, you have a glossary. I'm sorry, after the play, you have the glossary and you have lots of new words, the expressions. Now, because as it happens to be the conversation that takes place between native speakers, you may have a couple of contexts where you may not be able to understand the complete meaning, but don't worry, as I have been repeatedly telling you, words in isolation mean something else, words in a context mean something else. You will find a fifth woman while showing a photograph, she would say, that is a scream. Don't you think that is a scream? I sat the other way around just for the fun of it. You know, always we have used the word scream as a verb, right? Shouting in pain or in fear. But here it is just a prank, a funny thing. That's a scream. It means a funny thing. So contextual meaning varies, and you have lots of questions for your reading comprehension. After which you do have, as usual, the routine way of checking with your vocabulary, checking with your comprehension part, adding new words. You have got a new assignment way. If you're a dentist, a person who helps to remove or set right the teeth or remove a rotten tooth is called a dentist. You have lots of words, that is, what do you call this person as, the professional names of all these people. Other than that, you have reading comprehension, and you have after reading comprehension you have been asked to give certain writing. Here it happens to be narration. How do you narrate something? How do you describe something? These may look synonyms. Unfortunately, most of the children have been making use of these two ways of writing paragraph to be synonyms. To describe a paragraph, to describe an incident, you need more of adverbs and adjectives, and to narrate from one action to another action, you need more of verbs there, right? So this is being taught to you, after which you have your ICT corner. So the third unit, once again a very quick flashback. Lynn talks about forgetting in his own humorous, typical style. Then we go on to our William Wordsworth, the nature poet, after which we move on to The First Patient, a one-act play, which I would again appreciate if you can act it out in your class, so that your classmates can enjoy the fun, and you will also learn how language gets, the oral language, the spoken form gets more of meaning when it is accompanied by appropriate body language. Thank you. Thanks a lot for listening.